Hello everyone and welcome back to a new Fortnite Creative Tutorial. Today we're making a slightly more advanced mechanic that allows us to either on a trigger-based or time-based schedule make blocks and damage zones appear and disappear, as you can see in this clip. It makes for a great and completely new death run mechanic that only gives you a limited time to get across. Of course, there are many more ways this can be used, like in a duo death run where one player starts the mechanic, which then in turn gives the other player limited time to run through to the next part. Or maybe a dropper where the damage zones appear and disappear, and you can make it as advanced as you want. And I'm sure you guys will come up with tons of new and even crazier ways to use this system. Alright, let's jump into how to build this. The first thing we'll need is obviously a barrier, so grab one of those and place it down. There's 4 options we'll be using today: the enabled option, the enable when receiving from channel and disable from, and lastly, the barrier visibility. For this example, we'll put the barrier visibility on the blue force field, but change that to anything that matches the design of your map. Next up, we'll disable the barrier to start. If you start the game now, you will see a small bug that still shows the barrier, but lets you walk through it. But we'll work around that later. Don't worry. Now, just add a trigger to your map. Switch the triggered by damage option to on and set the when triggered transmit on to a free channel. I'll just use channel 1 as I haven't used any channels yet in this map. If you have already used some, just use the first one you have free. Now place another trigger right next to it, but transmit it on channel 2. This will create an on and off button. So what we'll do is we'll just bind these channels to our barrier and we will have the first part of our system in place. Set the enabled when receiving from option on your barrier to channel 1 and the disable one to channel 2. This also works for death zones, and for demo purpose we'll put the zone visibility in game to on and the base so that we know exactly where it is. And then just like with our barrier, we'll bind the enable and disable channels to channel 1 and channel 2 respectively. And as you can see, we've now got an on and off button to enable and disable our barriers and death zones. Next up, we'll change this from an on and off button to a mechanic that returns to the original state after a few seconds. For this, we'll move our triggers a little bit out of the way and we'll move them to a place that is outside of the map where players can see it. Now add a music sequencer right before it. Change the length to normal and the damage to very low. This will activate the on and off switch at the same time. Now go to your off switch, which in my case is channel 2, and look for the delay option. What this does is when it gets activated, it will wait X amount of time before actually sending the signal. So if the music sequencer starts, it will trigger both the on and off button. The on button signal immediately transmits on channel 1, while the off button waits the set delay time before sending the signal on channel 2 and disabling it again. As you can see, we're getting closer and closer. Just like after the first part, you can use this mechanic so far individually without continuing. But for our tutorial, we'll take it a bit further, and for that there's still 2 more steps that we're missing. The first one will be to put this mechanic in a loop so that it will constantly repeat itself with a set timeout. And the last thing we'll eventually have to do is automatically start this whole sequence when the game starts. Alright, so first up, looping. How this will work is when the disabled signal is sent from channel 2, we will also activate a different new music sequencer. So set one close to it, change the music sequencer length to normal and the damage to very low, just like before. And change the start sequence when receiving from to channel 2, which means when we disable the barrier, we also activate this music sequencer. Now add a third trigger in this new sequencer. Set the damage option to on, just like we did on the other triggers, and set the when triggered transmit on to channel 3. Now set the delay of this new trigger to the desired disable timeout we want. Now lastly, bind the music sequencer start sequence when receiving from to channel 3. So let's say in the mechanic we already had before, if you set the delay on trigger 2 to, let's say, 5 seconds, it means that the barriers were enabled for 5 seconds and then disabled. The timeout we're setting now on trigger 3 is the timeout before they will reactivate. So setting this to, for example, 10 seconds means you will have 5 seconds to make the run and then wait 10 seconds before they are back up. However, we still had that issue where the barriers appear the first time, making it look weird when starting the sequence. But that will automatically fix itself when we auto-start this whole mechanic at the beginning of the game. I would recommend to never put the time delay of trigger 3 to only 1 second, as it sometimes bugs out and only makes the barrier flicker but not actually disable them. Now lastly, what we want to do is take this entire sequence, this entire mechanic that we've built, and just start it when the game starts. So we'll add a last music sequencer to the cycle. Make sure no other music sequencer touches it, and set the activate on game phase to game start to start the never-ending cycle of enabling and disabling. And make sure the music sequencers aren't touching each other, so you might have to play a little bit around with the width and length of the other sequencers as well. And that's pretty much it, guys. Now you can start playing around with this and implement variations on this. You can use it either on dead zones or switch around the enable and disable channels on different barriers to create a mechanic that interchanges two barriers, which means that you will have to jump at the exact moment that they're switching to be able to make the jump. Another cool trick you can do is change them in death zones when they're disabled, so that you would immediately fall to your death. To do this, we just take our entire mechanic and bind it to a barrier that is at least 3 high. Then one tile above it, place a death zone that is 2 high, and then above that we'll make our parkour. As you can see, as soon as the barrier is disabled, the death zone is enabled, which means if you're still on it, you're a goner. Or another crazy idea could be to make a dropper where the death zones are only visible for 1 second, then invisible for 10, so people have to remember where to jump. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this brand new mechanic. If you did, please leave a like and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. There's loads more awesome new stuff coming soon. There's still some crazy new mechanics that I've invented that I'm going to teach you guys soon. And before I go, if you managed to complete the duo death run, please let me know, as I'm very curious to see how you guys liked the map and how you guys did. There's loads of more new mechanics coming soon, trailers, maps, so much awesome stuff is coming soon. So stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.